What happens when a child actor turned R&B artist grows up to become a leading voice on algorithmic justice? Today's guest, Dr. Avriel Epps, merges personal story, cutting-edge research, and a visionary call for digital ethics. From trauma to transformative justice circles, from MySpace to machine learning. If you've ever asked, who's in charge of AI? This is the conversation you've been waiting for. Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan Peters, psychologist and leadership coach. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to become better versions of ourselves and have a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. Today's show is AI, digital justice, and creating a fair and just world with Dr. Avriel Epps. Dr. Avriel is a computational social scientist and a civic science postdoctoral fellow at the Cornell University Cat Lab. She completed her PhD at Harvard University in education with the concentration in human development, a Master's of Science in Data Science from Harvard's School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, and a BA in Communication Studies from UCLA. Avriel's work explores how bias in predictive technologies affects racial, gender, and sociopolitical identity development. She aims to understand the complex ways that algorithm design and computer-mediated social expectations, often communicated through artificial intelligence systems, impacts the beliefs, behaviors, and health of developing humans. Avriel is also the co-founder of AI for Abolition, a community organization dedicated to increasing AI literacy in marginalized communities and building community power with and around data-driven technologies. They have been invited to speak at Google and TikTok and for the US courts, focusing on algorithmic bias and fairness. Avriel is also the author of a new kids book, a kid's book about AI bias, also for adults. We'll talk about that. And in the fall of 2025, they will begin their tenure as assistant professor of fair and responsible data science at Rutgers University. Avriel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So let's start with how a R&B artist and musician turns computer data scientist, AI algorithmic expert.
That's a great question. And it's actually I'm going to explain it. It's going to actually make a lot of sense, I think. So, I am a millennial. I start the book, my kid's book, off by saying I'm a Black girl who grew up on the internet. I was one of the kind of first of the generations to really be on social media. And as a creative young person trying to navigate my way through the entertainment industry here in Los Angeles, where I grew up, I was really trying to make a space for myself where a lot of stereotypes and prejudices in that industry were limiting kind of my options. And so I turned to the internet as a teenager and found a massive audience for myself on like MySpace at the time, but then eventually YouTube and Instagram and all of those places. And then by the time that I got to college, I had a lot of questions about why that space existed for me in a digital world and why I was still coming up against and meeting so much resistance to be a multifaceted, complex version of Black femininity in the entertainment industry. And so my first research project as an undergraduate was looking at how race and gender themes about race and gender were showing up in hip hop music that was being shared and streamed online versus the stuff that was being pushed out through more traditional media outlets like the radio. And started and so that was kind of like my first scientific exploration of how do digital spaces shape our identities or shape how our identities can how we can navigate our own identities. And then, fast forward years after that, I find myself in a PhD program being really interested in not just the digital spaces writ large, but the underlying technological structures
Hmm.
and how those shape our identities and how it shapes identity development for the teenagers. Now, me as an adult researching these things for the teenagers that are going through that process now, Gen
Hmm.
Z and eventually Gen Alpha.
So give me circa, what year was this when you were at UCLA and you started your first research exploration?
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll start by saying that I've been in the internet entertainment industry as a working professional since I was 2, so
Oh,
1992,
wow.
and and then in the 2000s and the 2010s was putting music out independently as an artist. And then UCLA, the research was happening around 2012. And I think that's a really good question, Dan, because in terms of streaming, this was kind of an interesting short period of time where streaming was really shaping the music industry, and also it wasn't being measured in terms of its impact and how music was being charted, or like what were the top hits of the time. And so that research project that I did really could only happen in like a very small, like few year period.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. And MySpace. So for someone your age relative to my mature age, I remember MySpace way back in the day, and I thought it had gone away long before apparently it did.
Well, it did. By the time I was in college, MySpace wasn't really a thing anymore. But in my like early teens, before I got to college, I spent quite a lot of time building up an audience on MySpace. And I guess it must have been right around the time I started driving. So like 14, 15 years old, finding music producers and like connecting with other Black artists in the LA area. God, I had no sense of stranger danger on the internet. So,
Mm.
and we can talk about how I maybe should have had more supervision during that time. But yes, by the time I was doing that research, we were more so looking at Facebook,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it was right around the time Instagram had started to take off.
What did you find? If you can go back there to your beginning of your research career, like what did you ultimately find?
Yeah, great question. Simply put, we found that there's just a lot more diversity in the representation of um, like pro-social themes around Blackness that rap artists who were being shared online were talking about in their music. And the stuff that was being disseminated through traditional media had a lot more antisocial themes. So you can think about kind of like the antisocial stereotypes of Black masculinity being violent and criminal and all of those things. And then the antisocial stereotypes of Black femininity, like hypersexualized, promiscuous. And so that was kind of what was characterizing what was going out, what was being pushed out by the industry. But the music that hip hop fans online were sharing were much more socially conscious, much
Mm.
more, many more themes of like political activism, resistance to like oppressive systems of power, and more feminist themes as well.
Hmm. Well, and I know we're gonna talk about how technology works these days and AI and the bias that goes with that. So as I say that, I'm couching this or contextualizing my question is it seems to me that before the internet, there were much fewer gatekeepers, or social media, I should say, also like gatekeepers in terms of who is pushing out what images, what messages, which you got frustrated with, versus all of a sudden, lots of people are pushing out what they want to push out, right? So it was a changing of the tides of who controls the information.
In the early days, absolutely. And that, though, was before the rise of algorithmically curated feeds,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
recommendation systems
Right.
on these platforms. And so this was like chronological timelines. And so this like
Yes.
more quote unquote democratic, which we can totally unpack. I don't necessarily believe in the um, utopian narrative of the internet being fully democratic when everyone first got access to it, because there were still so many people who did not have access to these spaces. But there was, again, this brief period of time where before algorithmic curation, we might be seeing a more well-rounded or holistic picture of the content that is showing up on people's feeds.
Right. It was definitely thought of as more utopian in the sense of you just put your stuff out there for people, right? And it wasn't as well, we'll talk about the algorithm. Like it wasn't as there weren't as much agendas theoretically, right? It was more like this is a free space. This is an open space. Not
Yeah.
anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I think that there were still many people who did not have access to the internet. And we see that through who was publishing on Wikipedia at the time, who was publishing on Reddit, who are the authors of the content on the internet. And that matters because then when we fast forward 15 years to the rise of generative AI, who was publishing content, which was still largely white folks and men, then that data becomes data that trains the large language models of today.
Yes.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
there were these pockets of youth culture and counterculture that were happening online, but largely it was still a pretty white dominated space for a long time.
Okay, before we keep moving through there, you've piqued my interest because I had not known in my research that you were in the entertainment business since H2. So just so we understand you more fully, what were you doing all of those years?
Mostly acting. So I got my first national commercial, I think, when I was 2, and my first recurring TV role when I was 6 on a Nickelodeon show called Hey Arnold, as a voice actor. And then, in addition to that, I had been on several other kind of kids' TV shows and some films, but um, I definitely did not have this long, illustrious acting career. But I would say that I did grow up in the entertainment industry, right? I'm pretty tall. I'm 5'11". So by the time I hit puberty, I shot up really quickly and I stopped getting acting roles. But then all of a sudden, modeling agencies were really interested in me. So I kind of meandered my way through all the different parts of the entertainment industry until I removed myself from it around 2016 or so and decided to go get a PhD.
How did those experiences impact you and influence you?
Mm. Well, I'll say that the impact they had on me is probably best summarized by saying I would not put my own child in the entertainment industry. I
Got it.
think, yeah, I think I experienced quite a few traumatic things at the hands of adults who were probably not very trustworthy and shouldn't have been in positions of power over children in those times. And then I also think that there is kind of and I talk to my friends because I have many friends whose kids are in the entertainment industry. So I talk to them about this, this conditioning as a young child that you get around needing to perform for the approval of others, and going out on castings and knowing that you're being judged on your looks or, how well you read, and that just not being good for a person's social, emotional, or cognitive development at a young age. So I've done a lot of a lot of psychological work in adulthood to kind of heal from some of those earlier experiences.
I did hear you in one of your the talks that I listened to, a podcast. You did talk about, and this is among the themes of what we're talking about, which is justice and transformative justice, restorative justice. If you're comfortable sharing your own experience of being on both sides of the algorithms bringing people to you, and then also on the flip side of healing as a result as well. So in a sense, parts of this that can, as we're going to move to, like how we use this stuff for good. Are you comfortable sharing that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, so when I was in my early 20s, those algorithmically curated feeds um, made a former friend who had sexually assaulted me go viral for some of the work that they were doing in prison. So, prison advocacy work that they were doing. And it was a pretty painful moment for me to see this person who had harmed me in such a profound way get lots and lots of attention and recognition. We were talking like millions and millions of people hearing their story. And to not be able to be on the internet without seeing their face for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, but at the same time, a few years later, kind of a, a series of recommendation algorithms also brought me to a physical place where I was in community with people who knew that person and had invited me to be part of a transformative justice circle with them to do some healing around that moment when we were teenagers. And then I ended up in a multi-year process where we sat and we talked and we processed what happened from both of our perspectives, and we talked about what accountability would look like and how we could move forward. Having mutual community members and sometimes having to be in the same place at the same time, and having to share digital space. And
Mm-hmm.
it was really, really, really powerful, and it really helped me understand firsthand that there are profound alternatives to how we currently think about criminal justice or the criminal legal system when it comes to the most egregious forms of harm, like sexual assault. I don't think that him going to prison, which was for something different than what had happened between us, but I don't think him going to prison like transformed me in any way. It didn't help me heal in any way. I don't think it would have if it was like what happened to us that sent him to prison either. I just don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But being in a process, a reconciliation process, an accountability process with this person did bring me a lot of healing. And so it really called into question in my own mind, like, what purpose does the criminal justice system serve if there is a different container, like if we could be in a container with other, trusted community members, we could be in conversation about these things. And like, that is actually what allows us to both move forward as more whole human beings in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so I think now, because I am so deeply immersed in thinking about predictive technologies and artificial intelligence um, and also had this really profound experience, I am doing a lot of work now to see if there is a way to bring those two things together,
Mm.
and if we
Mm.
can use massively scalable technologies to provide an alternative to punishment culture
Mm-hmm.
in the criminal
Mm-hmm.
legal system when these kinds of harms happen and people don't want to involve the criminal legal system.
Mm. We are visioning here, right? Visioning of what could be. Um, Algorithms. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing. And
Yeah, thank you.
often our personal experiences, when they meld with our professional um, experience and interests, can be really powerful in creating change. I think like the most powerful. And so you are definitely a vehicle for change when it comes to this. And when you speak your story, um, it's authentic, right? It's real. And also this idea in this world that we have, where everything is so quick and everything is so immediate, and we want buttons for everything. And you went through a multi-year, multi-setting process of healing, um, that sounds like was effective. It was helpful. It was healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And it's for us all to be thinking about, most things that are meaningful take time, and for us to to acknowledge that and honor that and teach that to our children who are at an example of growing up in an environment, in a society where everything is so immediate, so instant gratification. And we humans don't really work that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's part of, I think, my own body's resistance to even the quickening of the pace of life since ChatGPT became widely available to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, everyone always comments on my email signature, which is basically like, I am prioritizing my own well-being and the quality of my work over speed, and like hyper capitalistic expectations for me to produce like a machine. I am not a machine. So
Mm-hmm.
please don't expect for me to respond to you within the next 24 hours. I don't know exactly what it says, but it's something along those lines. And the people who comment on that the most often are actually the people who are caretakers of my child. So his teachers at school, his therapist, his occupational therapist, like those people are like, I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
it's
I think it's
refreshing,
because they're with children every day and they understand like
right?
they're watching human beings grow. Like the natural cycle
Mm-hmm.
of our bodies is a
Mm-hmm.
slow one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when I think about algorithms, um, we had a recent podcast conversation on adult the rise of female ADHD diagnoses, and one of the phenomenons with the rise in diagnoses was during COVID, and TikTok was doing its algorithm thing. And yes, there's overdiagnosis, and yes, we have to be very wary. So we're going to talk about all sides of this. One of the positives, like your experience of the algorithm, is it helped many women realize in their 30s, 40s, that this is a thing that they learned about themselves and were getting information, which was taking them to these sites and taking them to these professionals. And so this algorithm, let's talk about algorithms, and which I know is a huge thing, but I feel like most of us older people and younger people who are going to read your book is we need to understand, right? You talk about digital literacy. Like, we need to understand what algorithms, this machine, and what it actually is and what it actually does if we are not paying attention.
Absolutely. I mean, so I think that one of the things we can immediately do to give ourselves more power and agency in a socio-technical world is to just accept and know the fact that none of these systems are magic. And to some of your listeners, it's going to sound like a big no duh. And to some of your listeners, it's going to be like, but no, it does magical things for me. Like, what are you talking about? And so, I know we're going to talk about the book in a second, but I spent quite a bit of time in the kids' book explaining what is data. Data is lots of information about the world that gets turned into numbers, and that those numbers are then used to math is used to model those relationships between those numbers. And then we can use those mathematical, versions of the relationship to make predictions about what might happen in the future. And that is it. They are just prediction machines. um, and um, and still they have a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, the people who have control over them have a lot of power to also shape what direction human beings take in different contexts and different settings. And so that's, to say that they're not magic, not objective, not value neutral is not to say that they don't have a lot of power, because they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's that nuance, I think, is really important for people to understand. And then, most of the high schoolers, adolescents that I come into contact with have heard or been exposed to like basic algebraic concepts like y equals mx plus b. And if they can grasp that, they can understand how a couple of numbers can come together and you can create a line that is some kind of trend. And I'm like, that is machine learning at its most basic. When you take a data science class at a university, the first thing you need to learn how to do is linear regression. And linear regression is basically just y equals mx plus b. So like breaking it down in that way, I think helps to demystify it. And then we can have the hard conversations about, okay, what does it mean for a homogenous small group of people in our society to have control over prediction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the more interesting conversation to me.
Right. And this is when we start thinking about big data and these predictive models and the ideas of it being used on, hundreds of thousands of brain scans to determine the recidivism rate of people to be paroled in prison and so much more, which then also gets us into bias because everything that is created has a bias from the lens of the creator. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah. What outcome that we care about, what constraints we care to place on that outcome, what we're trying to limit in terms of error or outcomes we don't want to see. All of those are human decisions that have to be made in creating a predictive technology. So yes, the cognitive preferences, the cognitive biases of the people coding these programs absolutely make their way into the final product. And also, and this is going back to the conversation we were having earlier about who's publishing on the internet. The data that we have available to us to feed into prediction systems or predictive systems matters just as much, if not more. And data does not exist in a societal vacuum. The data that we collect about certain people for certain things are decisions that are made by human beings. And so who if we're talking about criminal justice, like predictive technology being used in criminal justice or medicine or any high stakes decision making context, the people who are in the criminal justice system are the ones who have data being collected about them. What about all the people who may or may not be committing crimes, depending on how we're even, also this is a question of
Mm-hmm.
who decides what is a crime and what is not a crime. But what about all the people who are committing crimes for which we do not have data about because they're not the ones that are caught up in the system? And so that in and of itself creates a bias in what predictive capabilities are possible with that data. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also heard you talk about that when it comes to artificial intelligence and medicine, for example. Um, AI is seemingly pretty darn good at making diagnoses in a pretty quick way. Of course, scouring all of the data that is out there in a millisecond, right? So it's how do we know when to trust, when to question, um, what is being used for good, what might have some more sinister and less pure um, goals in the information? Like, how do we go about navigating this?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. I am certainly not a wholesale techno pessimist. I do not think that there is no good use for artificial intelligence. I think in research settings, it's incredibly helpful because, like you said, we can crunch a lot of numbers in a short period of time, and we can make many discoveries in less resource intensive ways. So I'm all for the use of AI in, say, coming up with new drug formulations that then will have to go through a very rigorous FDA approval process, or modeling climate threats. These are the kinds of ways that I am very excited about AI, or these are the contexts in which I'm very excited about artificial intelligence being applied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In some high stakes decision making processes, I think the use of artificial intelligence is warranted. But because we just do not have rigorous testing, and like protocol development processes in play for this technology, because it's so new, it's so unregulated, I I just don't think that we should be letting it loose out in the wild for
Mm-hmm.
folks to
Mm-hmm.
use, um, without a lot of evidence that it is going to do much more good than
Right.
harm.
Right.
And also, it's not a simple calculation of does the good outweigh the harm? Because if the harm is disproportionately falling on groups who are already marginalized and are already experiencing lots of different harms, I don't think that's good enough. I don't think we can say, oh, well, it's doing a lot of good for all these other people who get a lot of good already in their lives. And like, but this little 5% of people who are being harmed by it, we shouldn't care about them. Well, I'm saying, well, actually, we should center those people and we should make sure that they're actually receiving the majority of the benefits from this technology before we can
Right.
say
Right.
this is a good technology for the world.
Totally. And this brings me back to some of my earliest research methods and statistical classes in graduate school when we're looking at false positives and false negatives and p-values and 0.05 p-value. Okay, so that's fine if we're doing something about like, I don't know, something benign, which I can't think of right now, but it's not good if there's going to be 5 out of 100 people are going to be put into jail or put onto death row when they're innocent because the statistical test is going to get it right 95% of the time. So on the one hand, we're like, well, that's great. That's a really high number. But when you think about the individual lives that are impacted by the mistake, and this is far before artificial intelligence, like these are some really high stake decisions that are at potentially at play with our technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. And happening at scale and more rapidly than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to account for that part of it too. Um, yeah,
Well, this
totally
is
agree
yeah.
with you.
Okay, well, so this is the thing that freaks me out. So something that if you were in our house, you would hear me say to my wife often, who's in charge of AI? Like with every new thing, like who's in charge of AI? Like I enjoy using AI for my purposes as well. So I am not I see the value too. But in the big picture, who's in charge? And there's people like you who are researching this and talking about this. And I know there's lots of organizations in your nonprofit, which is also talking about this. And tell me, is anyone in charge?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the investor class is in charge.
Okay, okay, oh, okay. Let me say it differently. Then you're right. You're right. Okay, that's not my question, but
Okay.
you just answered what I said. My question is, who's in charge of the ethics and the development of our human species and the decimation and the shrapnel and all the awful stuff that happens when going unchecked? Like, okay, who? What? So what is my question? What am I really asking you?
No, I mean, okay, I have an answer to that one too, but you might not
Yeah,
like it.
yeah.
I think the people who are the loudest in the conversation about ethics in AI and alignment, right? This is also a buzzword in this space. Like, are we aligned to human values?
Mm,
You look at the backgrounds of these people, it's a lot of eugenicists. It's a lot of white nationalists and folks who consider themselves to be long termists, which are like, we can sacrifice human lives in the here and now if that means that trillions of humans in the future might flourish, like hypothetical humans in the future might flourish. So,
hypothetical half cyborg.
right, yes.
Yeah. Okay. What you're telling me, I know, I appreciate, and it's not making me feel much better.
I'm sorry. I don't even know if
Right.
that was your question still.
No, it is. It is my question. It is. So please, because I think everyone needs to hear this because we can't just count. And this is the whole point of your work and your children's book and raising a future of digital literacy discerners, which is if we know there aren't necessarily gatekeepers that have the best interests of, I guess, current humanity involved. Like,
Yes.
what do we need to do? What do we need to know?
Yeah. So I have a lot of parents ask me a question along these lines often,
Mm-hmm.
which maybe a slightly different question than what you're asking me, which is like, how do I prepare my child for this future that I am not prepared to even navigate as an adult?
Okay, that's a good question.
And the answer to that for me as a baby-sized stepping stone is critical thinking. Like we in a world where it is very hard to discern what is true and what is not when we see it on the internet and now increasingly in real life. Um, we have to begin to really develop the skills of asking super hard questions and evaluating the responses to those questions that we ask, and then cross referencing that with other types of information. And this sounds really basic,
That
maybe
sounds like
really.
work, Avriel. That sounds like a lot of work, and
Well,
people just want to push a button and get an answer. But I hear you, right? Like,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
long gone are the days where I can tell you like, oh, just make sure your kid knows how to code and they'll get a great job, and like those jobs are gone. They're not going to exist by the time my kid is a working adult. He is not like white collar jobs are not going to be around, but any job that exists in the future, which is like not one that I can imagine right now because I can't see the future, I have no crystal ball, is going to require deep creativity and being able to be in long, deep creative processes,
Mm-hmm.
um, and also deep critical thinking. And those are the two things that we all need to be engaging and beefing up our skills in.
So, long-term critical thinking, creativity,
Mm-hmm.
and I also, you talk about at the end of your book, empathy for this world. So, where is emotion and empathy? Where, because computers are really smart and computers are learning at rapid rates with of human intelligence times X.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us holding like hope for um the need, like being human as being a valuable thing, there's emotion and there's empathy and there's things that seemingly as of yet AI and computers and computer learning cannot replicate to the same degree. To the same degree. Is that true?
Well, okay, no, they can't feel empathy, obviously. Like that's a
Yeah.
very easy answer.
Yeah.
But they can um what's the word I'm thinking of? Imitate?
They can imitate like
They can
the mental
imitate
health
empathy?
chat bots, right? Like, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling like that today.
Right, exactly.
Just
And
yeah.
actually that is a huge trap for our kids. Um the chatbot companions, everyone in my field is freaking out about chatbot companions right
Hmm.
now, and the potential and also the existing cases of chatbot companions like character AI, um, leading children down very harmful paths.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and so I might flip that thought that you just had on its head and
Hmm.
say the skills our children need are the skills that allow us to be good community members, which include empathy, but also includes conflict resolution and being able to feel uncomfortable and feel courageous to encounter uncomfortable social situations. Um, because what an AI is, at least now, what they're not doing is saying anything that makes people feel uncomfortable or like they're going to log out because they're profit driven and they want to keep people on for as long as possible.
Hmm.
And real in life community building requires being in very uncomfortable situations and having to navigate with grace disagreements and differences of opinion and ways of being.
Hmm.
And that I think is, again, maybe AI and chatbots specifically will learn to imitate this, but I'm not really concerned about that. I'm concerned about us learning the skills so that we can be in real life communities with each other. And I would say, and I have no like empirical evidence to back this up, but I would say that that's like a big reason for why we are where we are politically in this country, and why there's so much political division, why everything feels so fraught, why conversations and disagreements devolve so rapidly on social media and also in real life, why kids are afraid to engage in disagreement with each other.
Okay, you've given us a lot to think about here, and I am managing my own angst about this future. And I was just thinking, it's just how the marketing is so interesting. Up in San Francisco, the Bay Area, where I am, Waymos are everywhere in the city. Are Waymos in LA yet?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, okay. Right. And so the commercials are brilliant because they're making robots as friends. Like, goodbye robot, and like a friendly robot, and the robot actually saves people because they stop better than often humans do in distractible situations. And so I know this is a whole nother talk, but I'm just thinking about how do we both, I want to say, I was going to say embrace, but it's really like we're having to acclimate. Like, this stuff is here, and we know there are forces out there, and we know there's big money, and there's decision makers, and there's capitalism, and there's lots of us socially minded humans, researchers, activists, people like yourself who want to stay up with this and use it for good. Like, use it for a just world. Like, use it to help in so many other ways than efficiency. And so, how do you see that happening? How do we use this stuff for advancing agendas for equality, for increasing quality of life, for adding value to people's lives?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd want to say to that is we have to stop designing for the comfortable majority. So long as the tools that so long as the AI tools that we are making, or robotics, or whatever you want to, whatever X technology is being developed because it can serve a class of consumers that are going to then make the most amount of money return on that initial investment. I like that. We the like the middle class or the upper middle class educated majority who takes Waymos are fine. They don't need any more like conveniences. I as a person holding a PhD do not need a technology that is going to make writing emails faster and easier for me. Like, that is not a good use of our resources. We have real problems that need to be solved in the very near future if our species is going to
Yeah.
survive. We're facing a polycrisis of rising inequality, of climate crisis, climate catastrophe, all of the things. So the first thing is, for folks who are interested in supporting or even creating or developing predictive technology for good, then you have to say, okay, well, who are the group of people that I want to serve? It needs to be a group that is typically at the margins and is not being served by this technology right now. And then how can I bring them to the center as co-creators of this technology? Because if I'm in a position to most people who are in a position to create cutting edge technology are not people at the margins. And
Hmm.
so, even though I am a Black woman and I'm marginalized in lots of different ways, I still have a level of privilege that, like, I need to figure out and account for when I'm engaging communities that don't have access to the kinds of tools or resources or knowledge that I have.
Hmm.
So that has to be the first thing. Like, can we center the folks who are at the margins? And then the second thing is, once we do that, does the existing state of the art technology that exists or is at our disposal, is it possible that that can be used to do more good than harm for those marginalized folks we are now centering? And sometimes the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the technology is just not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be able to use discernment, like, actually, this is not a technological, we cannot provide a technological solution to this problem. We have to
Mm-hmm.
provide some other kind of solution to this problem. Um, and then that should be the end of it. Occasionally, we should be like, okay, the technology is not the, like, we don't need
Mm-hmm.
to use technology for this. I don't know if that's like making any sense, but this is how I think about the work that we're doing at AI for Abolition,
Mm-hmm.
because we have to be ready to say AI is not the right tool to solve this problem, and then stop the project and like move on with our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And move
and
on to find another solution for the problem,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
the actual solution might be community organizing. It
Mm-hmm.
might be mutual aid. It might be something that like requires a real life process that can't be augmented by technology in any way.
Mm-hmm. So
Uh,
what I'm also hearing and thinking, so check me on this, is even in these areas, like AI can be a tool, but it's AI isn't necessarily the solution, right? Because AI can crunch data, AI, and then knowing the limitations of the data, what does the data represent, but it still gives you data. It still can come up with artificially created creative alternatives by which one can determine whether they want to dive deeper, do more research. But to
mm,
say, like, we are going to use this protocol and this program for all of these situations, when it doesn't work, that's where we have to, like, no, that's not the solution.
Correct. And also, I mean, this pains me to say out loud because I am a data nerd. I am a quantitative methodologist, but I know from my own lived experience also that sometimes the communities who are at the margins don't actually, they themselves do not need the data to validate their lived experience. Usually you need the data to convince somebody else who's not in your community that this is a real problem that you're facing or this thing that you're experiencing is real. But we also have to be careful to just assume that being able to collect and measure and analyze things quantitatively is in and of itself inherently useful for folks at the margins.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, and it's not to say that it will or will not be, but I think it's something that is like it is uh, a question that we should ask ourselves as outsiders to communities. Like, if I
Mm-hmm.
have this special statistical tool that I know how to use really well, I can't just like assume that handing it over or helping a community like quantify their lived experience is going to, in and of itself, be useful to them.
Mm-hmm.
It might just
Mm-hmm.
be reflecting back to them what they already know, and then that's kind of a waste of time.
Right.
Unless, of course, it can be used to convince others who hold power and resources and money to do something about that problem that they're facing.
So it makes me go back to thinking about digital literacy and us all becoming educated in this technological AI algorithmic era we are living in. We were living in it before those of us lay people even knew we were living in it. And now daily it's exponentially growing, right? The people, how many times do you hear, wait a second, I was having a conversation about going to this place, and now on my phone and my TV and my computer, this place keeps showing up. Like, this is normal now, right? So however
Mhm.
this all works, it's real. So what for adults, what should adults be thinking about as they are also ushering in a new generation of children, people they're caretaking, any the new generation, to teach them how to be literate in this
Mhm.
digital age?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're modeling it right now in this conversation, and folks should be encouraged to have these kinds of conversations with each other, other adults. One of the questions you asked me earlier that was really interesting was like who controls or like who's in charge. And I think another question that folks should constantly be asking when they come into contact with a piece of technology is who benefits.
Hmm.
And maybe and so we're actually pretty practiced as a society now in asking that question about social media. I think there's that common phrase like if you're not the oh my gosh, if you're not the buyer, you're the product or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how we think about social media. And we understand that like we're actually not the beneficiaries of social media. Like we are the products being sold to the
Mm-hmm.
beneficiaries who are corporations. Um, and I think we need to also start having that conversation about AI. Who benefits from my use of this technology? I might be benefiting marginally by being able to create marketing materials for my company, my small business using ChatGPT, but like that can't be why ChatGPT is a multi-billion dollar like and like it is valued at that can't be why the industry at large is valued at trillions of dollars, right? Because small
Right.
businesses are faster at making marketing materials. Like, no way. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, like, well, who is actually benefiting from this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, and then also who's being exploited? Because that's the flip side of that question. And I think largely all of us as individual consumers are the folks being exploited. There's this other common refrain that like data is the new oil. Like data is more valuable than oil. Well, if data is more valuable than oil, and I'm producing however many quintillion bytes of data per day, where's my paycheck? Like, if I
It's
had
coming.
if I had oil in my backyard, I would be so wealthy. But somehow I'm producing all this value for these corporations by typing and clicking and talking and videotaping. Like that feels like exploitation to me. So I
Mm-hmm.
like that. I think is um, the inquiry into the power structure at play
Mm-hmm.
is the critical thinking that adults need to be doing. And then, of course, if you're a parent, the next logical question in my mind is how is my child being exploited?
Mm-hmm.
If I can recognize that maybe I am being exploited, or not maybe recognize, but if I can question, am I possibly being exploited? Then the next question is, okay, does that mean my child is possibly being exploited in some way?
And teaching them, as you do in your book,
Mm.
about how it all works. So that every time they swipe, every time they click, it's doing something. It's being captured. It's being crunched. It's going into a larger database. It's creating an algorithm for what's going to be fed to them next. Like that is sounds so simple, but it really is. It's not. It's not. It's really important information that we all need to be aware of, and particularly the young ones who are vulnerable.
Correct. And the young ones for whom this reality will be like breathing air
Hmm.
because they have never experienced anything different.
No,
Um,
no,
so they won't even know that it could be like it doesn't have to be this way and that they should be curious and critical of it.
yes, yes. I just thought of the far out future Jetsons of back in the day. Is okay. It's time to go do your homework, and then remember you have a 10-page paper to write, and child goes into the room, comes back out 1 minute later. I'm done.
Right.
I just typed it into my little bot, and I got this 10-page paper. Right? It's like
Exactly.
it's just normal. It's normal now,
Exactly.
already normal. Okay. Um, so your book at the end, you say, oh, by the way, in one of your talks or podcasts that I listened to, you talked about it's for brave adults. It's a kid's book, but it's for brave adults. If you're brave, you read it. So of course, you fired me up. So I went and read it, um, and I really enjoyed it. And it's laid out so user friendly, of course, for a child. The irony is, though, many of us adults who are not in the sciences, the math, the data industries, like we don't understand this stuff. So it's actually it's for both of us. You write by fostering a mindful approach to AI We aim not to shun technology, but to become wise navigators and compassionate guardians of a digital world where fairness and empathy are embedded in every click, tap, and swipe.
Mm,
That's the vision.
that's a vision. Yeah. Um, so often I see people, and it's so easy. I sometimes do this too, um, to just hand over control and be like, oh, like you were saying, it's convenient. There's a button that I can just push and I can say, oh, it'll do it for me. And what my hope and prayer is that there will be a generation or a subpopulation of a generation of folks who feel fiercely responsible to guard and protect their peers, their young ones, because there has to be somebody who feels that responsibility when it's so easy for people to just hand it over and not feel the responsibility to not be a guardian. um, and that is, like, in my ideal world, what this book would inspire in
Mm-hmm.
a small group of young people,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even a large group of young people who read it.
One of the themes that is like coming to me as I'm reflecting on your words in this conversation is we're living in a world, we're in a society that increasingly pushes and values this immediate gratification, immediate get the thing, finish the thing, do sh- the thing showing up at your door. And what you're really talking about is the opposite, in the sense of we need to take time to think about this, to discern, to do our own research, to ask the questions, to maybe decide that it's not the way to go. And instead of having something delivered to my door, it's actually better for me to go to this um, family owned business and pick this thing up, even if it takes an hour versus 10 minutes, 5 minutes for a click. Like it's going against what is being fed to us.
So you, yes, 100,000%. I recently started doing that. This year, I was like, I am going to stop shopping online as much as possible. And there, I found out that there are just so many wonderful benefits to driving out of my way to not go to a big box store to find. I mean, I'm lucky in Los Angeles, there's lots of
Mm-hmm.
little specialty stores that are small businesses. To find the small specialty store, to have a conversation with the clerk who's working the counter, like that has a lot of personal benefits to it. And I think, for folks who are heavy AI users, um, they'll also find that there are a lot of like personal small benefits to reducing their reliance on AI or recommendation systems in general. Like, I'm sure that there are lots of downstream positive impacts of going to the library to find a movie on a DVD versus like trying to scroll through Netflix, right?
Mm-hmm.
But beyond the individual benefits of doing those things, our planet needs us to do that,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Right.
deeply.
Yes.
And because it's so easy and so convenient to tap a few buttons and have a whole box of junk delivered to your door, that you were just like in a fever dream, like, oh, I need this thing. And in reality, you don't actually need it, right? Like, our planet needs us to do that. And so, yes, I resonate so deeply with the example that you just gave. And
Mm-hmm.
I hope that lots of people listening experiment with
Yes.
reorienting their lives in that way to being more slow for those reasons.
Yes. We've been doing that too, and share the same. I mean, this isn't a purist thing. There's things that we will still order online because we need it quicker or we can't get it in a certain place. But
100%.
just being mindful of taking the time, and it's so interesting. It's like going to these other stores and driving these extra 10, 15 minutes and taking this extra hour or two out of your day. It's funny. It feels so old school. It's like, oh my God, remember the time when we used to do this? And it was not that long ago, but it seems like it was so long ago. And you're right, you get these personal connections and you slow down. And this idea of we need to speed up to be more efficient, but actually an extra 15, 20-minute car ride where you can think or just listen to music and not be doing or getting on to the next thing, it all has values. Like being has value as much and in many times more than doing.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, okay, wait, I have one more example I want to share because you just
Yes.
inspired me. There are, I was sitting in a parent group a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how to model mindful use of technology in front of our children.
Mm,
So the conversation was really about what are the restrictions we were going to want to place on our children, like, do we follow the wait until eighth movement, which is like waiting until eighth grade to get a smartphone or get on social media. And then we were like, well, all of this is all great, but we can't expect our kids to act this way if we're scrolling on our phones in front of them all the time. So as a parent community, we also need to be mindful of that. And I also was just thinking in that moment of how many times I have to explain to my child when I'm on the phone in front of him while he's trying to get my attention that I'm like, mommy's trying to buy groceries. Like, I know that I'm on the phone in front of you, but like, I have to do this because I'm buying groceries. And then, like, that being a difficult thing for him to navigate because he's seeing me on the phone and that like feels not great for our relationship. And then also, what is he missing out on by me not taking him to the grocery store and me
mm,
not teaching him how to compare prices or how to read food labels before I decide what I'm going to buy, or like be pleasant to the people who work at the store? And like, what are all of those skills that he's missing out on in addition to we're not connected in that moment when he wants my attention because I'm on the phone trying to order groceries?
totally. I
So
love
yeah,
that.
like
Love that. I love that. Yeah. So it's again, we're expanding, we're pushing back, we're pushing back from the simpleness, well, the easiness, the simpleness, the quick pace, the on to the next, and really like trying to take a page to, it's the slowing down. It's a slowing down. And I kind of feel it's like an anti-productivity movement or
yes,
anti-efficiency
yes.
movement. Kind of, it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about.
Well, that's anti-capitalist, Dan,
Yeah,
'cause
yes.
why
Oh,
do we
it's
need
called
to
that
be
too? It's called that
productive?
too? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Like, what?
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
benefits from us feeling like we need to be efficient? Like, that's
Yes,
not a
yes,
central tenet of being a human.
yes.
Like, anyway.
All right, well, this is about empowerment, right? This conversation really is about empowerment, and we, individual humans, we community-based humans, we social humans, have always been able to accomplish things with intention, with effort, and with hopefully value, like ethics and values, and thinking about. So for everyone out there, Avriel and I, we're enlisting people to help be in charge of the ethics of the development of AI and algorithms, so we all benefit, knowing that different groups have different things they need and different experiences and different benefits and lack thereof. And we need to be open, we need to discern, and we need to do the hard stuff.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, well, you inspired me. You really inspired me. So I am
Same.
I am my eyes are wide open, and I'm going to be talking about this with people on a micro and macro way. So thank you for your work and your enthusiasm, and I just your open mindedness to this too, because being an expert, there's often pressure, in my experience, to be an expert on a point of view within a domain, and you're looking at this with the same way that you're teaching, which is we need to discern, we need to continue to ask the hard questions.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you for the conversation. This is a lot of fun.
So tell everyone where they can find your book, where they can find your speaking, your research, and where you're going to Rutgers. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. The book is available for purchase everywhere where books are sold, all the major retailers. But I encourage you, especially after this conversation, to go find your local small bookstore and
Mhm.
ask them to order it if they don't already carry it, and maybe order an extra copy to donate to your local library. And you can find me on all of the social platforms as King Avriel, and my website is avrielepps.com.
And that's a flashback. King Avriel was actually your performance name, right? Your R&B
It
name.
was, yeah,
Yeah,
it
love
totally
that.
was, and it
Love that.
kind of has just stuck. All my friends now just call me King, and I like it. So
King. All right, I love that.
it's kind of a
Yeah.
cheeky way to talk about power dynamics and my detestment of them, my disdain for power dynamics.
I love it. I love it. Well, best of luck in your work and your new post at Rutgers and all the important work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Yeah.
Dan. It was
Yeah.
great to be here.
You can just feel Avriel's passion and curiosity about algorithmic justice and the possibilities we have to educate, to discern, and to really think about how to use AI for good while being aware of what's behind the machine and teaching our kids to do the same. Here are 5 key takeaways from this show. Number 1, algorithms aren't magic, they're human coded. AI systems reflect the values, biases, and blind spots of their creators. Understanding this helps us reclaim agency in the digital world. Number 2, justice can be restorative, not just punitive. Avriel's personal story shows that true healing can happen over time and in community. Number 3, tech literacy begins with critical thinking. For our kids and ourselves, we need to teach not just how to use tech, but how to question it. Who benefits, who's being exploited, and what intention is driving it. Number 4, empathy is the antidote to digital dehumanization. In an AI-driven world, our humanness, empathy, emotional discomfort, and community building becomes our superpower. And number 5, it's time to slow down. Hyper efficiency isn't the goal. Slowness, connection, and discernment just might be what saves us. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please share with everyone you think will benefit. Thank you for being a part of our community, for subscribing, for your 5-star reviews. And as always, remember, we have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Uplifting Folk by Awesome Music. Artwork by Kelly Dwyer. Follow us on social media at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, visit drdanpeters.com.